webinar. Welcome to the Wild Health Sleep webinar. What I'm going to share with you is 15 tips on how to help you get a better night of sleep. So without further ado, I'll share a little bit about myself. I've actually been a health coach with Wild Health since December of 2020. Before becoming a health coach, I was a public school teacher and a track coach. And a lot of times people think I'm a runner, but I was actually a triple jumper and a long jumper. So I basically focus on horizontal jumps. My Christian faith and fascination with wellness kind of drew me into this world of helping others be healthy. And as a health coach, one of my kind of hobbies has been to study sleep and circadian rhythm. These are two of my favorite topics, and it's actually some of the things I love to coach my clients in. So I want to share with you my sleep story because sometimes people think, Chris knows all this stuff about sleep. He must have a perfect sleep rhythm. He must get 8 hours a night with no struggles. He must have perfect REM and deep sleep. But in fact, I've actually had the opposite experience. So as a child, I was the type of kid who had a lot of vivid dreams and sleepless nights, sleepwalking, nightmares, night terrors, all that kind of stuff. In college, I was that kid that would pull the all-nighters, didn't sleep a lot, drank a lot of coffee, a lot of espresso shots, things like that, energy drinks. Then I got married, and a year after being married, my wife and I had our first daughter. So for the past 8 years, we've had at least a child in the home, and we've actually had babies in the home. I've got 4 children. We've had babies in the home for all of these years. And so I've had to not sleep well. I've had to get up to screaming baby, crying baby, sick baby, all these different things, and just find ways to survive on minimal sleep. However, back in January of last year, we had our youngest sleeping through the night. Everybody's doing well, except me. The entire house is quiet, and I'm laying in the bed with the worst insomnia that I've ever faced. I've got the Oura Ring, I've got the Whoop, I've got an Apple Watch. I'm taking all the sleep supplements. I've dialed in my sleep hygiene, and yet I couldn't sleep more than 6.5 or 7 hours. And this was in a 9 or 10 hour span. And actually most nights was somewhere around 6 hours or even less than that. And I got really desperate. So I saw a sleep doctor. I did troubleshooting, learning. I was having middle of the night panic attacks and anxiety. And then I met with the doctor, and it turns out that as a 32-year-old man turning 33, I have sleep apnea, and it's a moderate sleep apnea, so about 20 apneas per hour. And so I've been on this journey of just trying to figure out how to live, how to survive with sleep apnea. But this major barrier has been a relief to me. But over the process of kind of learning this diagnosis and studying sleep, I've come to find a lot of information about sleep. And so that's why I'm here to share this with you tonight. So 3 important times that I want us to focus on tonight are after our sleep, before our sleep, and during our sleep. And this may sound weird. You may not be able to understand, well, why those 3? But it'll make sense as we work through. So you see this young lady on the screen, and I want to know, have you ever felt like this? Have you ever felt that you're so tired that you sit down to study, you look at the screen, and all of a sudden you wake up 2 hours later? Well, I want to walk you through a day in the life of people who may feel like this young lady. So imagine with me, you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, your alarm goes off. However, instead of getting up, you snooze until 8 o'clock. Then you drink coffee immediately upon awakening. And then you say, well, I need some energy, so I'm going to eat this large bowl of oatmeal, sprinkle some honey on it, some berries, a little bit of brown sugar. Then you head off to work. You work from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then about 11, you get this major energy crash. But thankfully for you, there's bagels and espresso shots of coffee to get you through until the afternoon. You had your bagel, you had your double shot, so now you're not hungry for lunch. So you work through your lunch break, and then you get this major energy dip and brain fog at 2 o'clock. And this is when you look like this young lady. So then you wake up at your desk, realizing you got work to get done. So you reach for some handfuls of pistachios, you kind of munch on those for the afternoon, and then you finish your workday with another cup of coffee just to get you through until the evening. Now, normally you work out in the morning, but you didn't get to it because you slept in. So you decided you were going to go at 5, but you're too exhausted. So instead you go home, you munch on a few snacks, you devour anything you can get your hands on, especially carbs. And then after this exhausting and stressful day, you order takeout, drink a few glasses of wine at around 9 o'clock before you crash at 11 to start all over again. Through the night, you toss and turn, you wake up hot and sweaty, you have to use the bathroom 2 or 3 times, you have to even pop some Tums in the middle of the night because you've got reflux. And so you finally get into your deep sleep and boom, your alarm goes off and you start all over again. And this is what a lot of people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. I don't think that the wild health population lives exactly like this, but maybe you resonate with some of these examples. I tried to create an extreme example, but maybe some of these habits or some of these patterns have shown up in your life and in your sleep routine. So what I want to do is I want to help each and every one of us learn some techniques, some tips on how to sleep better so we can get out of this cycle and wake up each day feeling rested. So the first area that we're going to look at together is after sleep. And basically after sleep is when we start preparing for the next night. A good night of sleep begins as soon as you wake up. So one of the first tips that I recommend for after sleep in order to prepare yourself for a good night is to try to wake up the same time every day. You want to try to keep it consistent. And with consistency, I've heard any range from 30 minutes to an hour before or after your normal awake time. I prefer 30 minutes, but I was just listening to Huberman and he says if you've got to get some extra sleep, try not to go an hour past your normal sleep time. So if you normally wake up at 6, it's best to try not to sleep past 7. Now, you may be wondering, well, why does a consistent bedtime matter so much? Well, one reason is that our overall circadian rhythm is impacted by our sleep and wake times. They significantly impact it. And so, for an example, we have someone here tonight that's in Utah. I'm in the Eastern time zone, and he's probably in the Pacific or the Mountain time zone. So if I travel west, my sleep is going to be really, really altered from what it is now. But if you imagine staying up 2 hours later, it's the equivalent of if you traveled west. And then if you sleep 2 hours later, it's as if you've traveled west. And then you somehow have to regroup and get back on to your normal time zone. So this is called social jet lag. It's when you've stayed up for social reasons or just random reasons, and you've kind of given yourself jet lag. And so if we wake up too early or too late, we can throw off melatonin, we can throw off cortisol, we can mess with the adenosine signals to our bodies. And so, for example, you wake up 2 hours too early because you want to get that workout in and you got a busy day. Well, you could end up being awake while your melatonin is still surging and your adenosine levels haven't dropped, your cortisol hasn't spiked, and you end up feeling groggy and having sleep inertia. So one of my bigger pieces of advice, or one of the things I've learned, is just try to skip that snooze button. If you've set your alarm for 6:30, try your best to step out of bed at 6:31. Get on your feet, walk around the house. If the sun has risen, step outside, view the sunlight, and let your body gradually wake up. That snooze just doesn't help. And that actually takes me to my next point, which is to get some early sunlight, because light significantly affects our circadian rhythm and our energy levels. So I like to urge people to view outdoor light within 30 minutes of wakening. I learned that from Andrew Huberman, and he also had a guy on his podcast. I think his name is Samir Hatter or something of that nature. I can't remember the exact name, but he was saying that we need to get bright morning sunlight early in the day. And what this does is it reduces our adenosine, and it actually does better than a cup of coffee. And Huberman says that it actually, that outdoor light sets a timer for your melatonin production later in the day. But also getting that sunlight increases cortisol, which helps with wakefulness in the morning. And here's the cool part. If it's a sunny day, like in this picture, you only need 5 to 8 minutes in the sun to get a significant boost in your energy levels and signal your circadian rhythm to give you a better night of sleep. If it's an overcast day, you're going to need 10 to 15 minutes. And on a rainy day, you'll need 20 to 30 minutes. And so often people wonder, can I do this from inside of a window? But a window actually makes it 50 times less effective. So that means instead of 5 minutes of a sunny day through a window, you would need 5 times 50 minutes. So it's best, even in the winter, to get outside, get a hot cup of coffee, throw on your winter gear, and get you 5 to 8 minutes of that morning sunlight. Next, and as you'll notice, some of these can kind of stack on top of each other. Next is to get your heart rate up early. So an early cortisol boost will actually help you wake up without coffee. And so when we think about getting our heart rate up, what you can do here is if you set your alarm for 6:30, you can actually step out in the sunlight and then do 100 jumping jacks or 50 push-ups or burpees, or you can go for a 10-minute walk or a jog, whatever that thing is that can get your heart rate moving, get you going in the morning, out in the sunlight, and it's going to help just to boost your cortisol response. And again, this doesn't have to be your main workout. This can be short and sweet, and this can just be body weight stuff. But if possible, do this outdoors in the sun, and these exercise and light cues are going to be really good for your circadian rhythm. Now, you may be a type of person, I know I used to be, where I would wake up, I'd already have the coffee pot brewing at 6:25 so that it would be ready when I got up at 6:30. But research is showing, there's plenty of research that we need to give our bodies time before we ingest our cup of coffee. So the next tip is to wait on the caffeine. So rather than waking straight up, getting out of bed, fixing a cup of coffee and getting that caffeine rush, give yourself about 90 minutes and you're going to see a significant difference in your wake time, in your wakefulness. And what you want to do is you want to do these tips I've already given. And then about 90 minutes in, as you're heading into the office or as you're sitting down to study or do your meditations or whatever you're doing, then you drink that cup of coffee. What you get is you get a significant reduction in adenosine. You get the cortisol boost from the exercise. And then when you take in your caffeine, you get the added cognitive benefit of the extra focus and that zeroing in on your task that you feel when you drink a cup of coffee. But I do want to urge everyone here to heed your body and heed your genetics. I can't drink caffeine almost at all because of caffeine sensitivity. I get jitters, I get sweats, anxiety. So if that's you, skip the 90 minutes rule. Just try to avoid the coffee or the caffeine if at all possible, because it's going to make you more sensitive and probably cause you problems. This fifth one, eat your first meal earlier in the day. There's evidence that if we eat food earlier, our body temperature rises, we feel more energy, and we actually have more wakefulness. Some of you may be wondering, well, my health coach or my doctor has told me I should do intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding. So what do you mean eat earlier in the day? And I want to give you a couple of examples of how to fit this in. So one example would be, let's say that your feeding window ends at 7 p.m. We recommend everyone have at least a 12-hour window. So if you have a 12-hour window that ends at 7 p.m., that means you can wake up and have a snack or have breakfast at 7 a.m. But let's say you're on a shorter window, like an 8 or 10-hour window. Well, instead, you could have your first meal at 9 and finish at 7 for a 10-hour window, or you could kind of compromise and do a 10 a.m. to 6 or a 10 a.m. to 7 and have a shorter feeding window. But part of the reason I mentioned this first meal earlier in the day is it's going to promote wakefulness early, and it's going to help curb hunger later in the day. And we'll talk about that in the before sleep section, because we want to make sure that we're preparing our bodies early in the day for a good night of sleep at the end of the day. So I want to take a second and just see if anyone has questions for me.
There's nothing in the chat, but if anybody has any they want to shout out or put in the chat right now, feel free to go ahead and do that.
If not, I'll continue. All right, I'll keep moving. So the next area that we really want to focus on in order to improve our sleep is the before sleep section. And before sleep, I like to refer to this as the last 10 hours of your day. And this is when we prepare our bodies for strong sleep in the evening. And one of my favorite illustrations, and I don't remember if I heard this on a podcast or where, but we want to treat our sleep and preparing for the evening as a plane is landing. So when a plane lands, rather than starting wherever it's flying and just dropping straight down and landing on the runway, about 30 minutes before landing, the pilot lets you know, we're about to land, conditions are looking clear, we're going to prepare, and they tell you to start getting ready to land. And so what we want to do with our bodies as we prepare for sleep is we want to think about it like an airplane. Instead of dropping from chaos and stress and anxiety and work and email and all the demands we have on ourselves, we want to actually coast into our bedtime routine. So within that 10-hour window, the first thing we want to do is start to ditch the caffeine. Because caffeine can wreak havoc on our sleep. So for most people, this is going to be sometime around noon or 1. If you're an earlier sleeper, say you go to bed at 8:30 or 9, you'd want to dial that back to 11 or so. But also, you've got to remember your caffeine genetics because the half-life of caffeine is about 5 to 6 hours. But for some people, it can actually take 9 or 10 hours. So that means that if you have a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock, you're going to have half of that cup of coffee in your system at 10 o'clock when you lay down to go to sleep. And if you're a slow metabolizer or intermediate, you might have more than half a cup of coffee worth of caffeine still in your system when you're laying down to go to sleep. And some people deal with the stress and the anxiety of their day, and they wonder, why is it that I lay down and I can't fall asleep? It could be the residual caffeine. And a personal anecdote from my life is if I have a cup of coffee or some sort of caffeinated beverage at 3 or 4, it doesn't hit me when I'm falling asleep. It actually hits me in the middle of the night around 2 or 3 a.m. because I'm a slow metabolizer and I'm very sensitive to caffeine. So if you're having a late cup of coffee with lunch or after lunch, that could be the reason that you're having that hard time falling asleep or staying asleep. The next thing, and this is important, this is one of my favorite tips for nearly anyone, is try to eat smaller and earlier in the evening. So evening meal timing has significant impacts on our sleep quality. Large, late meals are going to require us to digest food while we're trying to fall asleep or while we're laying in bed sleeping. Research has even shown that there's glucose tolerance issues in the evening. And we look at some different SNPs here at Wild Health, the MPAS2, we look at some melatonin SNPs. And what we can tell is, A, does food affect your circadian rhythm? But B, does late night food affect your glucose processing or glucose synthesis in the evening? And we're seeing that for a lot of people, that causes a lot of problems. And one of the things you'll see is that if you use a CGM and you eat a late meal, some people will have high glucose up to 3, 4 a.m. or even the next morning. You add alcohol to that and you've got more issues. So we want to avoid late meals for that reason. But another important reason is because late meals actually raise our core body temperature. If you haven't ever experienced it, eat a late meal sometime and notice how you feel in the middle of the night. Notice your heart rate if you have an Oura ring or a Whoop. Look how the heart rate's increased and how just warm you are, how much your body temperature fluctuates from a late meal versus finishing early. But also, it can affect your circadian rhythm. And there are some SNPs that show us that you can actually have increased cancer risk with circadian disruption. So you want to eat smaller and earlier meals. The next one, it kind of goes with number 2, is to reduce or eliminate your alcohol. And I'm not a purist against alcohol, none of that. Like I believe everyone should be able to have a glass of wine or beer or whatever. but you want to keep that away from bedtime. I was just listening to Matthew Walker talk about the effects of alcohol, and he says we should rule out alcohol after dinner, but he even says if you drink alcohol with dinner, you're going to show signs that you had alcohol and it's going to affect your sleep. So whether you just have a glass with dinner and none after, or whether you completely avoid alcohol in the afternoon or evening, it's probably good to limit the amount you have regardless, because even a single glass of wine can disrupt your REM sleep. And Matthew Walker, he describes that, you drink that glass of wine or you have that strong drink in the evening and you fall asleep and you think, oh, that wine helped me fall asleep, so why not drink it? But Matthew Walker has a quote. He says, sedation is not sleep. So alcohol sedates, but it doesn't induce sleep. And worse, it actually fragments your sleep all night long. It causes numerous awakenings. So if you have a sleep tracker, you'll notice your efficiency will be lower. You'll have more wake ups, and you may not feel it, but it's going to affect your REM sleep. It's going to affect your fragmentation. And also if you have reflux, it's going to cause reflux in addition to whatever food you've eaten late that evening. So you definitely don't want that 1-2 punch of late meal and alcohol if you have reflux. The fourth tip, I like this one. This is something that I do with my family, especially during the winter when in Kentucky, central Kentucky, it gets dark at like 5:30 in the winter. I know for some of you, it gets darker even earlier, but you want to make sure that you're banning blue light, and blue light and bright light to keep your melatonin levels high. Now, you want to ban bright light because that's going to tell your melatonin to shut off, but you especially want to ban blue light because that strains your eyes, and that frequency of light has even more detrimental effects on our brain when it comes to sleep. So you want to make sure you got a dark and cool room, but you want to make sure you have darkness all throughout the night. And one of my recommendations is to start dimming the lights as soon as the sun starts to set. So if you're in the summer, obviously it's still bright outside at 6:30, but in the winter at 6:30, it could be pitch dark outside. So at that time, I wouldn't want to be sitting under these bright fluorescent lights. Rather, in my family, we do oil lamps. We light oil lamps and we eat dinner by lamp, and then we put the kids to bed. So you want to try to dim those lights, and you want orange light. You want to try to avoid the blue light, because even with blue blockers, bright light's a problem. But if you can dim the lights and not have any blue light, you're going to be better off. So you can purchase bulbs. Philips Hue has bulbs that you can change the color. Or for my bedroom, I put orange lights in instead of the daylight light bulbs. But there are so many things you can do. But if you do need to use your computer, if you do want to use your phone, if you do want to watch TV, which I do on occasion with my wife, then you'll want to have blue blockers. And you want the kind that have orange lenses, because those lenses block out more blue light than the clear ones. So definitely try to ban the blue light, but also try to ban the bright light. If you're going to watch TV, use your computer or whatever, turn the brightness down as low as you can stand it and try to keep it dark. And then lastly, just have a wind down routine. I've already mentioned landing the plane, but we all are creatures of habit. And when you talk about sleep training children, the biggest thing they tell you is you need a good bedtime routine. You want to do a bath, some warm milk or tea. You want to make sure you sing in the same order. You want to make sure you give them the same lovey, the same blanket, tuck them in. And that doesn't change for adults. We may not need a lovey or a blanket or a lullaby, but we need a routine so our bodies and our brains know it's time to shut down. So your routine may include a warm bath that helps cool your body temperature down. And we've already kind of talked about body temperature, but that's very important. We want to cool our bodies rather than raise our temperature. Reading a book or sipping some warm tea can help with those who have anxious minds. Reading something as boring as possible. So not biographies, not horror, those things that are going to get you stirred up. Stay away from the news. I've told many of my clients, don't read the news before bed. Don't read your stocks if that stuff stresses you out. Do some meditation, some prayer, some light stretching, go for a gentle walk. whatever it is, try to do that. But my big rule of thumb for the wind down routine, and I get this from Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, is aim for 1 hour of screen free time. He calls it the power down hour. So you want to start shutting your screens down, shutting your phones off, and finding non-screen things to do at the end of the day. And I know some of you are busy, you've got work to do, you've got emails to check, but I would rather see you get to bed early and not disrupt your sleep, and then get up early in the morning and check your email earlier in the day. Because if you check your email right up until you fall asleep and then you deal with sleep issues, that's only going to make your problems worse. So I'd rather see you have a routine where you're calming yourself, you're winding down, and then you're getting a good night of sleep. I see some things are popping up in the chat, so we can shout those out and see if I can answer them for you.
Sure. So some of the questions that we've gotten are, how long before bed do you recommend the blue blockers?
I think that really depends on the sunset. So sunset signals to our eyes that it's time to go to sleep. So I would say probably 5, 6 o'clock in the fall and winter, maybe 7 or 8 during the summer. But the longer you can go without blue light, the better. So maybe even all evening, because once you get past those early afternoon, mid-afternoon hours, your brain and your body need signals from the sun. If you notice in this picture, there are certain hues of light that only show up at sunset. So, and none of them are blue. They're orange, they're pink, they're purple, they're reddish. You want those colors instead of that bright blue. So I would say as long as you can, but as close to sunset as possible, start to get rid of those blue lights.
Cool. Then another question we have is, do caffeinated sodas have the same effect as a cup of coffee?
So caffeinated drinks are, it depends on the amount of caffeine. So a can of Coke, I think, has 35 milligrams. That's 12 ounces of Coke, 35 milligrams of caffeine. So if you drink a bottle, you're looking at 70. The problem with a cup of coffee is I make mine strong. You may make yours weak. The coffee shop may make theirs super strong. So you really don't know how much caffeine is in a cup of coffee unless you do some scientific measurements. So the rule of thumb, again, is just avoid caffeinated beverages altogether. If you can find a caffeine-free drink, that's better. If you can avoid sodas, that would be even better. But I always recommend finding the caffeine-free options, especially post-lunch. That's just the best option.
Sweet. Another question is on the subject of early eating. Would this require a full meal, or would a light snack still promote those hormonal benefits?
So there's a lot of back and forth on this one. Some people say no food whatsoever, it all disrupts your sleep. Some people say you can have a snack before bed. The thought I would have is, if you go to bed hungry and it causes you to wake up in the night, have a snack, because you don't want your lack of food to be something that keeps you awake, or you don't want a blood sugar crash. You don't want to run out of energy, especially athletes and those lifting weights. If you're doing an evening workout at 7 o'clock and you need to be in bed by 10, I would not recommend fasting after your workout and trying to sleep through that. You need to refuel, but just be smart. Do easily digested foods and try to fuel before your workout. And then that way you can have a smaller something after. But I'm the type that sometimes I need a snack before bed, but it's always something light at 100, 200 calories max, something that's not going to really keep me up at night. And you can use your Oura Ring, your Whoop, or something like that to help you identify like what foods cause my heart rate to spike and what don't.
That sounds great. And then the last question we have is, how much time would we need to spend exercising in front of an open or closed window to get enough sunlight?
There's not a specific amount of time, but if you are in front of a window, that's important. That's helpful, is to get in front of a window. Huberman says there's an app like a Lux meter, so you can kind of see how bright it is outside compared to inside. But I would say if you're exercising in the morning inside, maybe aim for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and then try to get outside for a walk or a break at some point. But if you can stand outside for 5 minutes and then work out for 25 in the gym, that would be even better, because then you get the direct sunlight without the window, and then you can get your exercise in. But the question is perfect. Exercise in front of a window and try to do your best to get as much light as you can.
Sweet. Those were all our questions for now.
Awesome. I'll move on to during the night. So during the night, and this is where I lived for a long time. So wake ups do happen. And the question is, what should we do about them? We can't pretend that we're never going to wake up in the night. So the first thing to do is protect your eyes. I know I've said it, and I want to be a broken record because I want you all to hear this and to continue to hear it. Bright lights and blue light are terrible for sleep. They are signals to the brain. They're signals to the body to stop producing melatonin, and we just have to avoid them at all costs. So you don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and pull up your phone. Like, I know that's a temptation. That's a habit that I had gotten into with my insomnia, and it makes it much, much worse. Instead of doing that, if you have to see a clock, look at a clock in another room. If you've got a Kindle or you've got something that you can kind of read that's doesn't have blue light or has yellow light or orange light, that's better. If you can turn on a lamp or light a candle, those things would be so much better than having a bright blue light. So I think that's important. The next thing is to ditch the clock. We should never be watching the clock in the middle of the night, especially if you're having trouble falling back to sleep. It doesn't help. In fact, there are so many anecdotal evidences that, oh, I see that it's 2:30 again. Oh no, I can't sleep. It's 3:30 again. I woke up at the same time last night. And you get this response, this anxiety response of, what am I going to do? I've got to be at work in 2 hours. I really need to go back to sleep. And so what you want to do is, instead, don't watch the clock. Just lay there, try to relax your mind, try to calm yourself down, and see if you can get back. Now, if you need to look at the clock, I would say look at it. If you think it's been 15 or 20 minutes, that's when I would say look at the clock. And if you've been laying there for that long, it may be helpful to get up, which is our next point, is when you wake up in the night, don't just lay there agonizing about your poor sleep. It's okay to get out of bed. And in fact, many sleep experts recommend get out of bed, go sit in a chair, try to read, listen to relaxing music, do something besides laying there trying to force yourself to go back to sleep. If I tell you not to think about elephants, then you're going to think about elephants. And if I tell you if you try to make yourself sleep, you won't make yourself sleep. And in fact, all you'll think about is the fact that you're not asleep. And so you want to break that habit of, like, I can't sleep, I need to get to sleep. I'm so worried, I'm so anxious, and just try to relax. Do everything you can, breath work. If you do stretching, whatever that thing is that calms you down, maybe even go back through your bedtime routine and see if you can get back into sleep. The next one is skip the snack. It's usually best to avoid middle of the night snacking. And the reason for that is it's a signal to your circadian rhythm that you need to be awake rather than asleep. So rather than doing that, you'll want to skip the snack and try to maybe drink some water, drink some tea, something like that. However, if you're a diabetic or you have a medical reason, then that's a completely different story. Do what you know to do best. But for most of us, it's not a good thing to have a snack in the middle of the night. And in fact, it's probably going to just make our sleeping situation worse. Now, if you're an athlete, you had a crazy workout that day, you didn't eat enough, and you wake up hungry and you can't help but eat, have a light, easily digestible snack. And then the next day, think about fueling, talk to your health coach, talk to a physician to make sure you're fueling well so that you don't end up waking up like that again. And then lastly is just tell yourself the truth. Strive to avoid the fatalistic thinking about disrupted sleep. So often, I'll talk to a patient, they're like, my sleep's horrible. And, it's like, how long have you been struggling with insomnia? Oh, it's been a couple of days that I haven't slept well. Well, a couple of days isn't full-blown insomnia. We're all going to have rough nights and rough patches. We go on vacation, we work a late shift, we party late, we drink a cup of coffee too late, and it messes with our sleep. That's okay. That's a different story. but we want to not tell ourselves that our lives are going to be ruined. Tomorrow's going to be ruined. My life is going to be over if I don't get back to sleep soon, because that reinforces the anxiety of insomnia. And then tomorrow night, if you have another rough night, you keep telling yourself the same thing until it does become a chronic insomnia. And sometimes it's mainly psychological, but other times it's physiological. So do we have any questions on this section? And I'm going to plug my computer up really fast.
We do. So someone's asking, which Lux Light app would you suggest?
I have not used any of them, so I will have to do some research and get back to you on that. I apologize. I should have looked that up, but I don't use them. I typically just go outside, but I think he talks about Lux Meter. So I don't know if that's the name of an app or not, but he said you can just get an iPhone app and be able to see the lux of whatever light, whether you're inside or outside.
Cool. That was our main question for this round.
Okay. Any other questions about during the night? Anybody, any thoughts? So in comparison to that first picture with the young lady falling asleep at her desk, I wanted to ask you, are you ready to take on a new day? And I want to walk you through how this could look in everyday life. So imagine you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you step out of bed. As the sun rises, you do a couple of stretches and a few jumping jacks outside to get your blood flowing and get your cortisol going. Instead of going straight for the cup of coffee, you rehydrate with a tall glass of water. After your water, you take a few minutes to do some gratitude journaling before heading out for a morning workout at the gym. After your workout, you eat a protein-rich breakfast with some complex carbs and some more water. Around 9 a.m., you have your cup of coffee and start your workday. You power through the morning and lunch surprises you at noon. For lunch, you grab some protein, some leafy greens, a couple of veggies, and a starch on the side. Instead of working through lunch, you decide to take lunch outdoors and enjoy a 10-minute walk before heading back to the office. You power through some more work. You're clear-headed, not drowsy as usual. When the energy dip hits, you grab one handful of nuts and some mixed berries. At 5 o'clock, you head home and you make a healthy dinner of some more protein, some veggies, and another complex carb. You have a glass of wine with dinner, and you finish your food and your wine at about 7 o'clock. You take an evening walk to watch the sunset before you head in at 9 o'clock to get ready for bed. With your devices off, you spend some time reading, journaling, and praying with your lights dimmed. At 10 o'clock, your thermostat is set to 67 degrees. You're 3 hours from dinner. You don't have a perfect night of sleep, but you give yourself an 8-hour window and your sleep data is looking pretty solid. Now, that's the kind of day that I like to have. I don't have that every day. I'm not promising that if you do these 15 tips that you'll have that every day, but that trajectory is so much better than sometimes what we settle for when we lay down to sleep at night. So hopefully these tips are helpful, and hopefully they help you to prepare for a better night's sleep even tonight. I do have some questions that you all sent in that I want to answer and discuss, but are there any other questions about this overall presentation?
Hi, I just had one question related to the wake up. So I asked the question about the light snack versus full meal.
Yes.
I just wondering kind of the same thing about breakfast. So like, for instance, if I just wanted to have something very small to eat when I woke up, would I still be getting those hormonal changes in effect?
Yeah, so if you ate a small meal at breakfast, you would get the benefit of the wakefulness. And what's cool about that benefit is if you do that every day at the same time, your body will start to prepare for that meal, and your circadian rhythm will learn, okay, he's going to be up at, let's say, 6:45, and he's going to eat at 7. And the more consistent you are with that, the more your body's going to prepare for that meal. And that's going to just sync up your system. Our circadian rhythms are very finicky, but they're also very strong in the sense that exercise affects our circadian rhythm, sleep affects our circadian rhythm, and eating affects our circadian rhythm, and even light. So if you can get a lot of those things lined up on a regular basis, your circadian rhythm will be strong, your body will be prepared. if you throw those off all the time, you get 6 hours of sleep one day, 8 hours of sleep another, you intermittent fast until one day, and then the next day you eat at 7, those kind of things throw you off. It's really about the consistency that you're building, that's going to train your circadian rhythm on when to be awake and when to be asleep, when to be drowsy, when to be awake, if that helps.
Yes, thank you.
I have a question. As far as like traveling, do you have any tips on like how to handle, like if I were flying to Hawaii from Utah and like that's I think a 6-hour time difference or something, like how would you handle kind of that to make sure that it's not disruptive in the long term?
So Huberman actually has an entire podcast on this. So if you look up on YouTube, Huberman Lab jet lag, he discusses this. It's tricky because it really depends on how long you're there. If you're only there for a short time, it would be good to try to match, especially with eating and exercise, to try to match where you're coming from. I know that's difficult with the 6-hour time difference, but the closer you can get to your normal time for a few days and then kind of gradually ease in. And then as you're about to head back, like ease your body back toward Utah time, the better you're going to be. But if you're there for, let's say, a month or two, just get on Hawaii time and then spend a few days preparing to go back. If you're going there for like 2 or 3 days, it's best probably to try to stay near your current sleep rhythms now, or eating and light rhythms. Obviously, sleep, those things are going to be more difficult, but it's the goal of trying to stay near it. But the biggest thing that I remember him teaching on was, as you're preparing to head out, head back home, try to start getting your body back on your original time. So if you need to fast during your flight, because normally at home you wouldn't be eating at this time, go ahead and fast at that time. If you got to eat at a weird time at the airport in order to match Utah, you would try to do something like that. So because your body you're eventually going to get back on Utah time. So if you can either stay near Utah time or work your way back to Utah time before you leave, that's the better option. But that's hard. And he talks about shift work and jet lag and how to kind of mitigate that, because some people you just don't have those options.
Awesome. Thank you.
Definitely. Any other thoughts or questions? Well, you all sent me some doozies here in the Q&A section. So I've written down some answers to some of these, and I'll try to work through as many as I can. How am I doing on time?
About 15 minutes.
Okay, great. So question one, I'm feeling anxious when trying to fall asleep, causes and solutions. So the reason I say some of these questions are a doozy is anxiety when trying to fall asleep could have a multitude of causes or reasons. It could be a death in the family a month ago. It could be stress at work. It could be you're drinking caffeine too late in the day. It can be that you're anxious about sleep. So what I would recommend is getting to the root of what's making you anxious and trying to work through that. But in the short term, let's say tonight you're trying to fall asleep and you're anxious, I wouldn't try to dig up the cause maybe right then and there, but rather I would incorporate some mindfulness activities or prayer or journaling or something like that to just help reduce your stress levels. A lot of times I'll ask patients, are you interested in gratitude journaling? Are you interested in writing all your thoughts down? And so let's say you've got a big sleep webinar tomorrow. Am I anxious about the sleep webinar? Write out, the sleep webinar will go well tomorrow. I need to review my notes. I need to make sure the slideshow is ready. Fold that up, set it on your desk. You got it out of your head, on the paper, and somewhere else, so that you can kind of piece your way through that. But there are so many causes that and solutions to whatever the roots are, that it's kind of tricky to answer that question. But hopefully, by building in some mindfulness techniques and things like that, you can get through the night and then start processing that root cause of your anxiety. Next person says, I struggle with getting deep sleep and restlessness. Deep sleep often occurs in bigger chunks earlier in the night. So calming the mind, doing those kind of the anti-anxiety, the mindfulness, meditation, prayer, those things really help. Making sure you drop your core body temperature is helpful. So taking a warm shower like 60 to 90 minutes before bed can help. You don't want to do it too long, less than 30 minutes. You could do a warm bath or something like that. Avoiding food near bedtime can also help keep that body temperature low and keep your heart rate low and help you get into that deep sleep. One of the things that I found that's really helpful is actually exercise. So you exercise earlier in the day, you end up your body needs that deep sleep to recover from the exercise. So that tends to help get more deep sleep. As far as restlessness, that can occur either because of something physiological or even something psychological. So it's important to work with your health coach and your physician to determine the root cause of restlessness. When I was dealing with restless nights, it was sleep apnea. I also have some genetic SNPs related to insomnia, and I'm also very caffeine sensitive. So reducing caffeine, working through some mindfulness, prayer, meditation, reading, those things that kind of wind me down, doing those things actually helped with my restlessness. I don't have perfect nights. I still have more awakenings than I like, but they've significantly decreased. And one of the biggest decreases came from getting the CPAP and not having to deal with sleep apnea without treatment. Wakening between 3 and 4. What's the best way to prevent this from happening and how to get back to sleep quickly? Hopefully some of those tips I gave will help you get back to sleep. As far as preventing, that's tricky because you got to get to the root cause. Sometimes it's people sleep against their chronotype. So if you're a wolf chronotype, which is the late night person, and you try to go to bed at 8 o'clock, your rhythm is thrown off. Your body's not going to want to be asleep from 8 to 4. So you're going to have trouble. You may fall asleep and then wake up at like 11 and be up till 2. The other thing I've noticed is dolphin chronotypes, which is what I am. If you force yourself to go to bed early, your body likes about 6.5 hours to sleep a lot of nights. And when you try to go to bed at 9, 6 hours later, sometimes you pop up. I'm not saying you can't sleep longer. It's just that it's sometimes a fight until you can train your body to sleep better. And so chronotype's huge. Michael Bruce, he's got the Power of When book, and he's also got the chronotype quiz. I recommend taking that and trying to follow some of his research, talk with your physician, your health coach, and see if maybe you should try sleeping in line with that. But I also ask these questions, are you sabotaging your sleep with late meals, caffeine, or alcohol? Do you have restless leg, hypoglycemia? Do you have sleep apnea? And then one of the most common questions is just, are you stressed out? Is there something that's waking you up every night? Do you have a big report? Do you have some big decision to make? And just kind of figuring that out. And then the other thing is, what in your environment could be waking you up? If you have little screaming humans in the room next to you and you wake up every night at 3, that's the reason. But if you have pets, if you have a train that comes through, if you've got moonlight shining through your blinds, if you've got music that plays a little too loud, there's so many things that could be waking you up. So you would really need to experiment and figure out like what is causing it, and then trying to address that. But I'll say this a lot. I'm a big advocate now after being 33 with sleep apnea. Like, if you're having major sleep disruptions every night for a long time, go work with your physician and try to get a sleep study, because sometimes there's nothing you can do to fix it until you treat the physiological cause. And that kind of brings me to the next one. How do you deal with menopause sleep disruptions? This was a big question. There's actually a video on YouTube, I think it's called Sleep and Menopause, that I listened to. And a lot of times with menopause, women run into hormone issues, which is obvious, and you get your hot flashes, things like that. That needs to be addressed medically. A lot of women have apnea, and it's hidden because they don't snore. They may not be overweight. They may not present the same symptoms that are typical for apnea. So that again would be in conjunction with your physician, but also medical conditions and medications can actually cause sleep disruptions. And sometimes menopausal women are taking medicines, or they're having medical conditions that are actually causing the wake ups. So my recommendation there is if you think your menopause is disrupting your sleep, maybe talk to your physician and get your hormones checked out. Make sure there's no underlying physical cause. And then if there's not, really dialing in your sleep hygiene, maybe working with a sleep specialist for CBT for insomnia. Those sort of things will kind of help you if it's not physiological and if it's not hormone related. This question about staying asleep longer in the morning, this one's an interesting question. And if I were to have this as a coach, the first few questions I would ask is, how early are you heading to bed? If you're heading to bed at 8, like you're falling asleep on the couch at 8 or 8:30, and you're waking up at 4 o'clock, that's a pretty good sleeping window. However, unless you have a job that requires you to get up that early, you may not want to. So you may need to try to push your sleeping window back an hour or two. How long are you wanting to be in bed? So if you're going to bed at 8, are you wanting to be in bed for 10 hours? Is that reasonable? And if so, then again, we'll want to push that bedtime out. How do you feel when you wake up? So if you're waking up at 3 or 4, obviously you don't want to be waking up that early. But if you're popping up at 5:30, you're feeling well rested, your Oura Ring data is strong, then I don't think that's a problem. But if you do want to sleep longer, it's probably going to be that wake up time. But if you're not going to bed early, let's say you're going to bed at 11 and you're waking up at 4, we need to try to get to the root cause of why you're waking up that early. It could be some sort of REM sleep disorder, which you'd have to get kind of verified by a sleep specialist. But it could also be that you're having caffeine too late in the day, your body temperature is rising, so you may need to grab something like an Uller, where you can actually cool your bed down because your atmosphere is too hot. Could be reflux. There's so many things that could be waking you up too early. But one really cool way to shift that, if it's none of those physical things, is to get a light box and view bright light later in the afternoon. And with this light therapy, you can work with like a sleep specialist or something like that. But what they can do is they can actually give you light therapy. So normally, like I told you before, you want to eliminate light early. But if you're the type of person that you're needing to push your wake time and bedtime back, you actually want light to stop your melatonin production so early so that you can stay up later and sleep later. So in that case, you would want to use light to push that sleep schedule out a little. So then how to let go of the day and not focus on to what is to come tomorrow. I've kind of shared some tips on that, but try to land the plane each day. And I highly recommend the activity of writing out what you have to do tomorrow and then setting it on your desk, or crumbling it up and throwing it in the trash and saying, hey, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Or if you've got a time early in the day, 4 or 5 o'clock, instead of ending your day like all the way to the edge of your day getting work done, try to give yourself like 30 minutes to process your day, reflect on it, and lay out what you have to do tomorrow. Each person is going to be different. We're all going to have different needs, but that's usually what I would think would be helpful. You're the person that you got all these waking events, you fall right back to sleep, but you'll wake up not tired after 4 to 6 hours. You got the same routine, you're doing everything. You sound exactly like I did when I had sleep apnea. It's frustrating, it's discouraging. But at that point, if I've done all of this, I would definitely see a doctor and try to figure out if it's medical. And if it is, get that treated. If it's not, you would probably be a good case for, or a good candidate for CBT for insomnia, which will teach you how to sleep. And within that is called sleep restriction therapy. And you shouldn't do this by yourself. You should only do this with a trained professional, but basically you you would work with this professional to shorten your sleeping window and then gradually lengthen it as your body learns to sleep again. And it's almost miraculous how much better you sleep after doing that sort of therapy. The question about recovering after working night shift, I'm going to send you to Huberman Lab. He has over an hour podcast on jet lag, shift work, and how to sleep better. So I highly recommend that option. As far as REM sleep, how much REM sleep is optional? We like 90 minutes here at Wild Health, which is approximately 20% of your sleep time. But take your Oura Ring, your Whoop, your Apple Watch, your Fitbit, take it all with a grain of salt. If you don't have something attached to your head measuring brain waves, you can't actually know how much REM sleep you're getting. All you can know is what the algorithm of your wearable tells you. That can be good for baseline data, but I would not lose sleep over it, literally, because these devices are not created to actually measure REM sleep. They just measure what happens during REM sleep. But there are studies that these things are 50 or more % off from night to night, from device to device. So you don't want to, I don't want you stressing over my Oura said this, my Oura said that, my Whoop said this. If it causes stress, don't use it. But if it's a tool, get your baseline REM sleep for you. If it's a lot over, that's great. If it's a lot under, I wouldn't stress, but don't put too much stock in the exact numbers, because these devices don't actually measure REM and deep sleep very well. That next question is kind of the same as what I said before. If you've tried everything else, I recommend seeing a doctor, seeing a sleep specialist, and trying to get help. And then lastly, for the restless sleep, look into your bedtime routine and evening light exposure. See if there are things that you're doing that could be sabotaging your restfulness. Consider your bedroom temperature. 60 to 70 is ideal. 65 degrees seems to be the best, most recommended temperature. That's a little cold. I don't have the money to run my AC at 65 every night, so 67 or 68 is good for me. And then chili pad. Did you exercise at all? And did you exercise too close to bed? If you exercise in the morning, that won't affect it as much, may actually help you sleep more restfully. If you exercise near bedtime, that can cause restlessness. Are you a dolphin chronotype? Because dolphins don't sleep well. They tend to be more restless. If lifestyle changes don't help, discuss with your physician about supplements like melatonin, magnesium, apigenin, L-theanine, things like that. And then lastly, again, you may need to see a sleep specialist. And the reason I keep harping on that one is sometimes lifestyle intervention, sleep hygiene just won't cut it. So you've got to seek some more help. So I hope all this was helpful. Hope it was beneficial. And thank you all for coming to the Wild Health Sleep webinar tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chris.
You're very welcome. Thank you all for coming. Hopefully you learned something new, or at least had some things reiterated that were important.